So the final part of our substitution video, we're going to look now at combining all of these tricky things. Indices, fractions and negative numbers. So let's start with something like so. And let's make x equal to minus a half. Our three steps, as before, are write it out in terms of meaning, substitute the values, and then calculate. Okay, so now let's start to substitute. Okay, time to calculate. Remember, I'm going to do the add at the end because of bid mass. So, minus a half times minus a half. If you've forgotten, take an example and work it through. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times minus 3 is minus 6. So minus 2 times minus 3 goes back to 6. So two negatives results in a positive when they are multiplied. So half multiplied by half. 1 times 1, 2 times 2. Add. 2 lots of negative half. Well, what's 2 lots of a half? Well, 2 halves. 2 halves makes 1 whole. So 2 lots of negative a half is negative 1 whole. Okay, a quarter, add negative 1. Well, if you add 1, you go up 1. So what happens if you add negative 1? That's right. You go down 1. So adding negative 1 is the same as subtracting 1. Okay. A quarter, take away 1. Well, it's going to be negative, so I don't have enough to do it. 1 whole 1 would chop into how many quarters? It would be 4 quarters. So let's actually take time to write a step. So we can see this sum as 1 quarter take away 4 quarters. Well, what's 1 take away 4? Minus 3. Lots of work in here on fractions, lots of work in here on negatives. These are tricky questions. We're talking about the real fiddly GCSE skills. We're going to tackle one more question, a really difficult one, but slowly, with negatives, fractions and indices. So looks tricky, but it's about doing it step by step. X is going to be 1/5. Y is going to be minus 2/3. So let's do the two steps we know we can do without any panic, which is write it out longhand and then substitute the values in. And the difficult part will be when we come to actually calculate. So, what does this mean? Well, 3x squared means, I'll tell you what, let's cover up what's inside. What does something squared mean? It means that thing multiplied by itself. So it means 3x multiplied by itself. Plus 2 divided by y. We'll do nothing there yet. Plus x times x times y. We've got more to do here before we start to calculate. 3x is 3 times x multiplied by 3 times x plus 2 divided by y. Now, there's a reason I wrote this in this format. Can you think of why? Y is a fraction, and this is where we would write the dividing by a fraction. So whilst we like to leave fractions written as a horizontal line, when we're doing dividing by a fraction, we will write this symbol. Okay. We've now written it out, and we can now start to substitute. A lot here to do, but we're going to make this simpler as we go along. I've noticed there's an error here, apologies. Well done to those of you who spotted it earlier. That should be the add from here. The advantage of writing it out in steps is you can see that it should have two adds. And what I just did was realise there was one missing here. I knew I had one here and was looking for a second. Well done if you spotted that. 3 times 1/5 is 3/5. And that's going to be times by another 3/5. Dividing by a fraction if you've watched the video, is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. If you need to go back and watch that video, I suggest you do it now. One-fifth times one-fifth is 1 over 25, but I'm going to times by the minus 2/3 on the next step. There is no rush to do it in one go. 3 times 3 is 9, 5 times 5 is 25. There's no cross-cancelling there. Now, to make this multiplication easier, I'm going to write it as 2 over 1. I can see some cross-cancelling here, so I'm going to cross-cancel the 2's. So 1 times minus 3 is minus 3. 1 times 1 is 1, so I'm not going to write that, because over 1 doesn't mean anything, it just means whole ones. Plus, no cancelling, 2 doesn't go into 25, so 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, 25 times 3 is 75. (9 over 25), add negative 3. Well, if you add 3, you go up. So if you add negative 3, you go down. So go down by 3. Adding a negative again will result in this. So let's tidy this up. That's 9 over 25, subtract 3 and 2/75. Because they're both being taken away, so I'm going to write it as one sum. How do I do the subtraction? I make my denominators the same. This one is multiplying both parts by 3. Didn't need to change this one. Why was that? Well done if you spotted that this one goes into that one. 3 of those make that, so there's no need to change it. Now, how do I do this? What I'm going to do first is take these 2 bits off here. So that leaves me 25 bits to take away 3. Do you notice anything that's worked out here that could make this a bit easier? That simplifies to 1/3. That's going to help us a lot. So, I've got 1/3 and I want to take away 3. Well, if I had 1/3 and I took away 1/3, I would get 0. So if I had 1/3 and took away 2/3, I would get minus 1/3. If I had 1/3 and I took away 3/3, I would get minus 2/3. How can you use that to help you see the answer? What does this have the value of? That is the same as 1. So a third take away 1 would be minus 2/3. So what would a third take away 2 be? It would be minus 1 2/3, because you have to take away another 1. So your number goes even further into negatives. So our answer then is minus 2 2/3. Some of you will not have liked that end part, so I'll show you a different way. 2 take away 4 gives you minus 2. 4 take away 2, so the other way around, gives you 2. So, if we turn the sum around, whatever answer we get, the answer to our question will be the negative of that. So we would then chop one of our whole ones into thirds and then take away 1/3. That is a very tricky question. And if you can do that question, I think you're going to be all right with substitution.